Welcome, everyone. Really, it's great to have you here with us today. I'm Ethan, and as always, I'm here with my co host, Lena. And you've just arrived at Natural Voices, our little corner of the internet. Now, if this is your first time here, let's slow down for just a second and explain what this channel actually is, because it might not be what you expect. This isn't a traditional English lesson. You're not going to hear grammar rules or vocabulary breakdowns or anyone asking you to repeat sentences. That's just not our thing. Instead, this channel is built on a pretty simple idea. One of the most natural ways to learn a language is just listening to it being used in real conversation. No pressure, no classroom feeling, just conversation. Because immersion works. And honestly, conversation is how language actually lives.
Exactly. Think about how you learned your first language as a kid. Nobody handed you a textbook, right? You learned by listening to family, friends, people around you talking all the time. You picked up the rhythm, the emotion, the way ideas flow. And most of the time, you weren't even trying to learn. You were just interested in what people were saying. That's the atmosphere we want here. We're just two people who genuinely love stories, especially TV series, and we sit down and talk about them. Our reactions, our interpretations, our disagreements sometimes, all in natural, everyday English.
And our goal is to make this feel authentic. Now, at first, it might feel challenging, and that's okay, really. You probably won't catch every word immediately. Nobody does. But if you stick with the conversation, follow the tone, the context, little by little, things start clicking. You begin to tune in. You understand more. And suddenly, the language doesn't feel foreign anymore. You're just listening. That's how comprehension grows naturally.
And since we're having real conversations, we don't stop to teach. No vocabulary pop-ups, no subtitles explaining every expression. We trust you. You're here because you want real exposure to the language. So we talk the way friends talk, clearly, thoughtfully, reacting to each other, building ideas together. And while you're enjoying the conversation, the learning kind of happens in the background, almost without you noticing.
All right, so let's talk about today's topic. And honestly, this is one we've been wanting to cover for a long time. Today, we're diving into Netflix's German series, Dark, a show we both absolutely admire for its ambition, emotional depth, and ridiculously complex storytelling. So this isn't just episode talk. We're reflecting on this series as a whole. Themes, characters, and especially the ending.
And before we go any further, we need to give a serious warning. This conversation will include full spoilers. Everything. All 3 seasons, including the ending. There's just no way to talk meaningfully about Dark without going into the major plot points.
Seriously, if you haven't finished the show yet, stop here. Go watch it first. Experience all the twists and revelations without knowing what's coming. Then come back. We'll still be here. Because half the fun of Dark is slowly unraveling the mystery yourself.
Absolutely. Discovering Dark for the first time is something special. The twists, the emotional punches, the connections, they hit way harder when you don't see them coming. So final warning. From this point on, spoilers are everywhere. We'll be talking freely about Jonah, Martha, the origin world, all of it.
So, if you've walked through the caves of Winden across timelines and worlds, get comfortable. This is where we dive deep. Because Dark isn't really just about time travel. At its core, it's about people. And honestly, that's what makes the show unforgettable.
And that's exactly the point. People hear German sci-fi time travel show and immediately think it's just another complex thriller. And yeah, technically it is complex, but calling Dark just sci-fi feels too small. Time travel, paradoxes, loops, those are just tools. The real story is happening somewhere much deeper than the genre itself.
I'm really glad we started there, Lena, because that framing matters. If you go into Dark thinking it's just a puzzle to solve, a timeline to map out, you might completely miss what the show is actually doing underneath all that complexity. The sci-fi parts, the wormhole, time loops, alternate realities, those aren't the destination. They're just the stage. And the story happening on that stage is painfully human. It's about grief, trauma, family inheritance, and that feeling, of being stuck repeating patterns you didn't choose, patterns you don't even fully understand. The time loop becomes a metaphor for that psychological trap, where the past keeps pulling you back no matter how hard you try to escape.
Exactly. That metaphor is the heart of the show. Look at season 1. On the surface, it's about a missing child, but emotionally, it's about loss. Every character is carrying some version of it. Jonas is crushed by his father's suicide. Ulrich is still haunted by the disappearance of his brother decades earlier. Charlotte is searching for her daughter, while she herself grew up without knowing her own origins. So the town isn't just connected by time travel, it's connected by shared trauma passed down through generations.
The caves don't just link years, they link pain. A grandfather's mistakes becoming a father's anger, becoming a son's confusion. And visually, the show reinforces that feeling constantly. It's almost always cloudy, or raining, or swallowed by fog. The colors are muted, grays, cold blues, faded greens. And that's not just style for the sake of style. It mirrors what the characters feel inside. Everything feels heavy, like there's always a storm hanging overhead. Even the soundtrack leans into that mood. It's haunting, melancholic, almost mournful. It's not adventurous sci-fi music. It's grief in sound form. Every technical choice serves the emotion first, not the science fiction.
And the time travel itself becomes the perfect storytelling tool for this. In a normal drama, someone might say, I'm repeating my father's mistakes. But in Dark, they literally meet their parents in the past. They watch the trauma being created in real time. Ulrich doesn't just feel anger connected to the past. He travels back and accidentally becomes the cause of someone else's trauma. So the paradox isn't just intellectual, it's emotional. Pain creating more pain, echoing forward and backward, until nobody even remembers where it began.
Which leads us to the emotional center of the story, Jonas and Martha. On a plot level, their relationship is what ties everything together. But emotionally, it's two people trying to find comfort in each other, only to realize they're trapped inside something much bigger and crueler than they imagined. Their love is both beautiful and catastrophic. It saves them and destroys them at the same time. And when we meet Adam and Eva, they're not villains in the traditional sense. They're Jonas and Martha, after centuries of loss, twisted their love into desperation.
And that's why the sci-fi framework works so well. It takes feelings we all understand, feeling trapped by family history, feeling like your choices aren't fully your own, wishing you could go back and fix one single moment, and turns those feelings into actual laws of reality. The characters aren't fighting a villain, they're fighting fate itself. And honestly, that's way more relatable than a simple good versus evil story. In Dark, the real antagonist is causality, and the human heart struggling against it.
And sure, we can admire how precise the plot is, how everything fits together. But what really sticks with people is the emotional question underneath all the mechanics. How do you live with pain that feels unavoidable? How do you break cycles older than you are? Dark doesn't use sci-fi to escape reality. It uses sci-fi to dig into reality's most painful parts. And a big reason that pain feels so real is the place where all of this happens, because Winden itself carries that sadness.
It really does. Winden isn't just where the story happens. It feels like part of the story. The rain, the forests, the caves, the looming power plant, all of it creates this atmosphere you can't escape. The town almost feels alive, like it's absorbing everything that happens there. And understanding that atmosphere is key to understanding why the show hits so hard emotionally.
Yeah, exactly. Winden isn't just a setting, it feels like an organism. From the very first scenes, you get the sense that something in this town is deeply wrong. It's isolated, claustrophobic. The forests don't feel inviting. They feel like walls closing in, a maze with no exit. And nobody ever really seems able to leave. The town holds on to people, just like the past does.
And that feeling gets stronger because it's always wet, always raining or about to rain or just finished raining. Everything feels damp, cold, heavy, like the town itself is crying and can't stop. Even inside the houses, there's this sense of discomfort. No place ever feels completely safe or warm. Secrets live everywhere.
The architecture adds to that mood too. The nuclear power plant towering over everything, cold and brutal. The bunker with that oppressive yellow light. The caves, literally the underworld of the story. These aren't comforting places. They're spaces of secrecy, experiments, buried truths. Everything important is hidden underground, in darkness.
And then there's the sound. It's almost never quiet. Rain hitting surfaces, wind through the trees, the low hum of the power plant, echoes in the caves, and Ben Frost's score just sits under everything. It's not melodic, it's this deep, unsettling vibration, like the town itself has a heartbeat and it's not healthy. That constant tension just stays with you.
And because of all that, the atmosphere tells half the story without needing dialogue. You feel something is wrong long before anyone says it. So when time travel and paradoxes show up, it doesn't feel crazy. It feels inevitable. In a sunny town, this might feel like an adventure. In Winden, it feels like a nightmare finally making sense.
And emotionally, that feeling is universal. We've all had moments where life just feels heavy, overcast, like everything around us reflects what's happening inside. Winden is that feeling turned into an entire town. And that heavy atmosphere, it all starts breaking apart because of one recurring tragedy.
Yeah, the foundational wound. Every 33 years, the same horror repeats. A child disappears. And that event tears open everything the town tries to keep buried, forcing old traumas and hidden connections back into the light. It's the scream that echoes through generations and starts the whole tragic cycle all over again.
Exactly, and that's why the disappearances hit so hard and dark. They're not just there to start a mystery plot. They're the exposed nerve of the whole story. Every 33 years, the town loses a child, suddenly, violently, without explanation. And the wound never heals, because time itself keeps reopening it, generation after generation. And there's something especially disturbing about a child vanishing. It breaks the natural order. It destroys innocence, not only for the child, but for the families left behind, and for the entire town's sense of safety. The forest, which should be a place for adventure and play, becomes a place of fear, a place where doors to nightmare realities open.
And each disappearance echoes the others, making everything feel even heavier. We start with Mikkel in 2019, which connects back to Mads in 1986, and then Eric and Yassine. But Mikkel's story goes even further. He doesn't just disappear, he becomes Michael, Jonas's father. So his disappearance isn't an ending, it becomes the beginning of another tragedy. A lonely life filled with knowledge he can't share that eventually leads to his suicide. The lost child becomes the broken father, whose death then traumatizes his own son. It's a closed loop of pain that poisons everything that comes after.
And the show makes it clear very early on, loss doesn't just happen and then fade away. It shapes people. Ulrich becomes who he is because his brother vanished. It makes him impulsive, angry, sometimes reckless as both a cop and a father. And that trauma spills over into his own kids' lives. Katharina's fierce personality, her desperation to hold things together, that also grows from the fear and fragility exposed by those events. So when a child disappears in Winden, it's like throwing a stone into still water. The ripples hit everyone, emotionally and literally in the timeline itself. Who lives, who loves, who even gets born, all of it changes.
And the show completely destroys the idea of a safe childhood. The kids aren't just victims, they become part of the cycle. They travel through time, they make decisions that shape their own futures, sometimes dooming themselves. They become parents, even ancestors. The cave doesn't care how old you are. And that means there's no real before the trauma. For Jonas, Elizabeth, young Helga, their childhood is the trauma. Growing up means learning how to survive in a world that was already broken before they understood it.
And eventually, the question shifts. It stops being who took the children and becomes something much darker. Why were they taken? And the answer is brutal. They were used as experiments in a desperate attempt to control time, sacrificed for a cause they could never even understand, which mirrors how trauma often works in real families. Children end up carrying consequences from problems created long before they were born. And the bunker, supposedly a safe place, becomes the opposite, a hidden chamber of suffering. Just like family traumas often stay buried, unspoken, but still shaping everything.
And that's why the missing child works as such a powerful entry point into the story. Everyone understands that fear instinctively. But Dark uses that fear to pull us into something much deeper. It asks, what if this loss wasn't random? What if it was necessary to keep the system running? Suddenly, it's not just a mystery anymore. It becomes a tragedy about destiny and inherited pain. And the force behind all of this isn't even a villain with intentions.
No, it's time itself. And not time as something characters simply use. In Dark, time is the landscape, the gravity, almost a god, an oppressive force with laws nobody can escape. And the structure forces us to experience that directly, not as a straight line, but as a web where everything is connected, where actions feel predetermined. And that changes how the entire story feels. Because this is where Dark flips the usual time travel story upside down. Normally, time travel is power, a chance to fix mistakes, to improve the future. But in Winden, time travel is part of the problem, not the solution. It doesn't free people, it traps them. The characters don't control time, they're swept along by it, following paths already taken. What feels like power becomes complete helplessness.
And it creates this cruel illusion of choice. Characters, especially Jonas, keep believing that if they just reach the right moment, say the right thing, they can fix everything. But every attempt to change events actually guarantees they happen. Ulrich attacking Helga, Jonas trying to save his father, Claudia manipulating events for decades, all of it only reinforces the cycle. The bootstrap paradox isn't clever sci-fi fun here. It's tragic. Nothing new is created. Everything just keeps getting passed around the same loop.
And even the narrative structure makes us feel trapped. We don't move forward normally. We jump between years like they're happening at the same time. Sometimes we meet older versions of characters before we ever see them young. So we already know where they end up. We see Adam long before we understand how Jonas becomes him. And emotionally, that tells us something important. The destination is already waiting. The journey is just catching up to it. Time isn't a river flowing forward. It's an ocean where everything exists at once.
And that creates this painful dramatic irony. We know more than the characters do. We watch young Jonas full of hope, but we've already met the broken man he becomes. We watch young Helga being manipulated, knowing the future version full of regret. So the suspense isn't what will happen, it's how do they become what they're destined to be? And we're forced to watch that tragedy unfold step by step.
Which turns time into the true antagonist of the series, a force that crushes hope, twists love into something destructive, and makes pain feel eternal. The beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. Not a riddle, just reality for these characters. They're living inside a sentence with no period. And the person who carries this struggle more than anyone is Jonas. But to understand his fate, we have to remember who he was before all of this started.
Exactly. Because when we first meet Jonas, he's not a traveler or a savior or a destroyer. He's just a grieving teenager. Fragile, lost, human. His father has just died, and that personal pain is the only thing defining his world. That small, intimate tragedy is the seed from which this entire cosmic disaster grows.
That's such a vital starting point, Lena. Because before the yellow raincoat, before the cave, before anyone even whispers the words time travel, Jonas is just a kid, shattered by one thing, his father's suicide. And notice how the series opens, not with spectacle, but with absence. We don't see the act, we feel the void it leaves behind. Jonas comes back from a mental health facility, which already tells us how deep the damage runs, and his house feels like a museum of someone who vanished. Hannah is drowning in her own grief and in her obsession with Ulrich, so Jonas, he has no emotional anchor, no solid ground, and what he feels isn't just sadness, it's confusion, a deep, gnawing confusion. How could the person who loved him most just leave, permanently, violently, without explanation?
Yeah, and that confusion becomes his weakness at the beginning. He needs answers, any answer, something that makes the pain make sense. And that's why he clings to Martha, not just as a girlfriend, but almost like a lifeline, A piece of normal life, a world where love doesn't suddenly disappear. Even his friendships feel off, like he's physically there but emotionally somewhere else. And Louis Hoffman sells this perfectly. The slow reactions, the numb stare. He looks like someone walking through fog. Jonas isn't starting a heroic adventure. He's just trying to survive grief, trying to understand why his dad left him behind.
Exactly. And the brilliance of Dark is how the cosmic mystery grows out of something painfully personal. The first clue Jonas finds, the letter, the black substance, none of that feels like sci-fi to him. It's just the last message from his father. And honestly, it only makes things more confusing. So when disappearances start happening, when the cave becomes important, Jonas isn't motivated by curiosity, he's desperate. Somewhere inside, he hopes all this weirdness connects back to his dad. Like maybe if he understands the town's mystery, he'll finally understand what happened inside his own home.
And that vulnerability makes him the perfect pawn for people and for fate itself. He has this emptiness where his identity should be, and then suddenly people give him purpose. First the stranger, his future self, then Claudia. They give him a mission: save everyone, close the knot, fix time. And that's a seductive trade, right? Swap your chaotic, meaningless pain for cosmic importance. Suddenly, your suffering has purpose. For a lost kid, that's irresistible, even if the truth behind it is horrifying.
And that's the origin of everything Jonas becomes, the hero and eventually Adam. Every choice he makes traces back to one simple pain: losing his father. Maybe he can't save his own dad, but maybe he can stop other sons from feeling that loss. Or, in Adam's twisted logic, maybe the only way to end pain is to erase the world that creates it. But it all starts small, just a son missing his father, a tiny human crock that eventually lets the entire flood of time pour through.
And once he steps into that cave, everything changes. He comes out in 1986, and suddenly his personal grief collides with something enormous. He's not just Jonas anymore. He's the one who knows. He sees his father as a lost child. He understands the mechanics of his own existence. And the knowledge he thought would give him control, it becomes the heaviest burden he could possibly carry. It isolates him, warps every relationship, and traps him in a future where every choice feels huge, but somehow already decided.
And what's scary is this happens to everyone who learns the truth. Claudia loses her connection with Regina. Helge ends up trapped in guilt for the rest of his life. Even Noah, who looks powerful, is isolated by blind faith in a plan that betrays him. Knowledge in Winden doesn't bring peace. It brings obsession, missions, destiny. And in chasing that destiny, they lose normal human connections. They stop being people and become pieces in the timeline.
And here comes the cruelest part: the illusion of control. Every character thinks knowledge gives them power to change things. Jonas wants to save Mikkel. Claudia wants to stop the apocalypse. Ulrich tries to kill Helge to fix everything. But their knowledge is always incomplete, and their actions are already part of the loop. So when they think they're fighting fate, they're actually helping it happen. Knowledge isn't a key, it's a script, and they're just learning their lines.
Which creates this heartbreaking irony for us watching. We see characters making desperate choices, convinced they're free, while we already know where those choices lead. Jonas trying to destroy the cave passage might actually be what creates it. His resistance becomes the cause. They fight with total conviction, but the ending is already written. Freedom becomes performance. And for Jonas, this destroys hope piece by piece. Meeting the stranger, then Adam, realizing what he becomes, accepting that saving the future means hurting people now, manipulating his own father, breaking Martha's heart, allowing tragedies to happen. Knowledge forces him to sacrifice parts of his humanity, hoping that someday it'll all be worth it. It's a brutal bargain.
And that's how Adam is born, not in a single evil turn, but slowly, through exhaustion, through repeated failure, through unbearable guilt. The boy who just wanted his dad back becomes a man convinced the only way to end pain is to end everything. And that transformation, that slow corrosion of hope, is what makes his story so terrifyingly human.
Because when you really think about it, what would it actually take for someone like Jonas to become Adam?
Tracing that path, it's like watching hope itself slowly turn to stone. And what makes it tragic is that Jonas doesn't just become evil. That's not what happens. What we're seeing is an idealist getting crushed again and again until the only thing left that still looks like hope is something twisted. Young Jonas wants simple things. Save his father, save Martha, save everyone, fix things. Then we meet the stranger, older Jonas, and the hope is still there, but now it's tired, heavy. He knows saving people hurts, requires sacrifice. He still believes suffering has a purpose. But Adam is what remains when even that belief collapses, when hope itself rots.
And the show makes that emotional damage physical. Adam's scars aren't just from time travel accidents, they're the visual proof of centuries of failure, of watching the same tragedies repeat, over and over. He's seen every variation, tried every solution, watched Martha die, and sometimes he's the one who kills her. Imagine carrying that memory again and again until your own face stops looking like you. His body becomes a record of suffering, and somewhere along the way, his logic bends. He stops asking how to fix the world and starts asking if the world deserves to exist at all. Destruction becomes mercy.
And the terrifying part, his logic actually makes sense in a dark way. He looks at Wyndon and sees an endless machine of suffering, kidnappings, betrayals, suicide, generational trauma looping forever. So in his mind, you don't repair something that broken. You end it completely. Destroy the origin, create a void, stop pain at its source. And Adam truly believes he's the only one willing to carry that sin, that someone has to become the monster so everyone else can finally rest. To him, he's not the villain, he's the liberator.
Which is why his scenes with the stranger are so painful to watch. He's not fighting an enemy. He's trying to convince his younger self to give up hope, to accept what he's going to become. When he says, "We're not different, just at different points on the same road," it hurts because it's true. Adam isn't random evil. He's Jonas after infinite grief, infinite knowledge, infinite failure. He's what happens when someone who cares too much lives too long in a universe that punishes caring.
And at the center of all of this is Martha. For young Jonas, she's normal life, love, a future, something simple. For the stranger, she's motivation and regret. But for Adam, she becomes the symbol of the knot itself, the thing that keeps the cycle alive. So he kills her, his own Martha. Not out of hatred, but to cut the emotional bond in his younger self, to create the trauma Jonas needs to become Adam. It's like emotional self-amputation, destroying his own heart to complete the mission.
And Martha is never just the love interest. She represents normal life, the life they could have had. But in Dark, that normal life is the trap. Love, family, connection, all the things we want are exactly what keep the cycle alive when they're built on paradox and trauma. She becomes both the reason they fight and the reason the fight never ends.
Exactly. Martha works on two completely opposite levels at the same time. At first, for Jonas, and honestly for us too, she's the emotional safe place. Wyndon is dark, rainy, depressing. And then there's Martha. Theater rehearsals, teenage drama, plans for the future, normal life. Her relationship with Jonas feels like the one thing untouched by the town's horror, something clean, something hopeful. After his father's death, she's proof life can still move forward.
And she's also our doorway into normal family drama before everything turns insane. The Nielsen family looks familiar. Parents fighting, rebellious siblings, annoying little brother, things we recognize. Through Martha, the disappearances first feel like a tragedy, not cosmic horror. So when the truth unfolds, losing Mikkel, discovering Jonas is her uncle, seeing reality itself split, her world collapses. And because we're emotionally attached to her, our sense of normality collapses too.
And then comes the brutal twist. She isn't just caught in time travel. She's born from it. Learning she becomes the genetic origin of the knot changes everything. She stops being just the girl Jonas loves and becomes the source of the paradox. Suddenly, she can't be his escape because she is the problem he's trying to solve. Her normality was always temporary, a beautiful illusion in a world already broken.
Which makes her death at Adam's hands devastating. He's not just killing Martha, he's killing the last piece of normal life, the dream Jonas was fighting for. For us watching, it feels like innocence itself dies in that moment. There's no going back after that. And yet, from that destruction, another Martha appears, one shaped differently by the same fracture.
Exactly. And the alternate world Martha shows the final stage of that transformation. If our Martha symbolized lost normal life, the other Martha represents destiny shaped by crisis. She isn't saved by Jonas, she's recruited for a mission. Her life becomes about protecting the knot, not escaping it. She becomes guardian of the cycle instead of its victim. Love in that world stops being refuge and becomes responsibility, even weaponized in a way.
And that alternate world proves something crucial. Change one event and the whole emotional gravity of reality shifts. It's not just cosmetic differences. That world grows from a different trauma, different loss, different obsession. In one world, people try to destroy everything to end pain. In the other, they preserve everything at any cost, even if it creates more suffering. Same fracture, different outcome, and both equally tragic.
An alternate world? It's like looking into a dark mirror that slightly distorts everything. And honestly, understanding it is key to understanding the whole story. In Jonah's world, everything begins with Michael's suicide. A loss born from knowledge, from time travel, from secrets. But in Martha's world, the original trauma is different. There, Martha herself dies as a child. And even though we only glimpse that reality briefly, the consequences ripple everywhere. Suddenly, it's not Jonas growing up broken, it's her family. Ulrich becomes the shattered one. Katerina turns into someone hardened by grief, almost unrecognizable. So this Martha grows up surrounded by absence, and that one missing piece shapes her entire psychological world differently.
And it's from that absence that Eva emerges. Adam is born from failure, from trying and failing to change things over and over. Eva is born from the opposite instinct, the terror of losing what still exists. For her, the cycle isn't a prison. It's a fragile structure that must be protected, because if it breaks, her son disappears. Her entire lineage disappears. So her motivation becomes absolute maternal love, pushed to a cosmic extreme. She's not trying to save the world. She's trying to keep her child's world alive, even if that world is endless suffering.
And that reframes everything. This isn't good versus evil. It's two people reacting differently to unbearable pain. Adam wants to end the system that creates suffering, violently, permanently. Eva wants to preserve the system, because within that suffering still exists love, family, continuity. Adam is attached to ending everything, silence, finality. Eva is attached to continuation, noise, existence at any cost. And the scary part? Both believe they're acting out of love.
Even the alternate world visually supports Eva's philosophy. It feels colder, sharper, almost sickly sometimes. And the knot isn't some hidden conspiracy there. For people like Sigmundus, it's practically doctrine. Trauma becomes tradition, and Eva's bunker reflects that. It's not a lab like Adam's, it's a shrine. The family tree painted like a sacred text, the triquetra everywhere. It's worship of the cycle itself. And Eva is just as ruthless as Adam, but her violence comes from preservation, not destruction. She manipulates people, ensures pregnancies happen, ensures deaths occur, all to keep the knot intact. She even sends her younger self to seduce Jonas, knowing it leads to the birth of the unknown. And in her mind, none of that is cruelty. It's duty, sacred responsibility. Love, pushed to absolute extremes, becomes monstrous. Which is why the final realization hits so hard. Adam and Eva think they're enemies, but they're really mirror images. Two responses to the same unresolved wound. Both trapped in stories they can't escape. Both right in some ways and completely wrong in others. Their war feels epic, but it's actually a distraction, a symptom, not the cure. They're reflections of each other, both refusing desperately to let go.
And that's the true tragedy, Lena. Their conflict isn't light versus darkness. It's despair fighting despair. Adam's philosophy is active nihilism. After seeing pain repeat forever, he decides existence inside the loop is the mistake. So his solution is radical: erase everything. Create a paradox so big it destroys the origin itself. To him, oblivion is mercy. If healing is impossible, then ending suffering becomes kindness. Eva, on the other hand, embodies preservation at any cost. She sees the pain too, but inside that pain lives the one thing she refuses to lose: her child, her family, her own existence. So for her, the cycle isn't a prison, it's a womb. Painful, yes, but necessary. Repetition becomes eternal life. She would rather her son exist in endless suffering than not exist at all. It's love mixed with fear, becoming possessiveness on a cosmic scale. And both end up trapped in the same false choice. For 2 seasons, the show makes us believe their war is the central conflict. Then season 3 drops the truth. They're both wrong. Both think the only options are endless suffering or nothingness. Neither can imagine a third possibility: a world where pain actually ends because time moves forward, where trauma can stay in the past instead of looping forever. They're so deeply part of the knot, they can't imagine life outside it. Even their appearances reflect that divide. Adam is burned, scarred, shaped by violent attempts to control time. His body screams struggle. Eva looks preserved, but emotionally frozen, severe, priestess-like. He's fire, trying to consume everything. She's ice, trying to preserve everything forever. And every time one attacks, the other becomes stronger. Their war feeds the cycle. Adam creates the suffering that fuels Eva. Eva preserves the system that creates Adam. They're a closed circuit, which is why Claudia's role becomes so brilliant. She's the only one who steps outside this emotional binary. She's not driven by despair or obsessive love. She's driven by curiosity and patience. She plays both sides, gathering information across countless loops, until she finds the anomaly: Jonas being taken to the alternate world. Proof that something exists outside the system. She discovers the third option: fix the origin instead of destroying or preserving the knot. Which means Adam and Eva, despite all their power, aren't healers, they're symptoms. Their war is the disease thinking it's the cure, and that disease spreads across generations, across families. Pain isn't just personal in Winden, it's inherited, passed down, encoded into bloodlines, until family itself becomes a knot.
That family tree, honestly, Lena, it might be the most disturbing diagram ever put on television, because it doesn't show growth. It shows a closed circuit, a trap. The Kahnwalds, Nielsen's, Dopplers, Tiedemanns, they don't just marry into each other. They intertwine across time. People aren't just born from their parents. Sometimes they're the reason their parents even meet. And sometimes, which is just insane to think about, they literally become their own ancestors. Lineage, something that should move forward, folds into a circle. Family stops being heritage and becomes fate.
And what's fascinating and tragic is how each family carries a different piece of the town's emotional wound. The Kahnwalds, they're haunted by suicide and mental collapse. Michael, Jonas, even Ines with her dependency. Grief just keeps resurfacing there. The Nielsens carry violent loss. Ulrich losing Mads, then Mikkel, Katharina's rage. It's always anger trying to protect something already broken. The Dopplers, scientific ambition and emotional damage. Bernd builds the plant, Helge becomes its human casualty, Charlotte spends her life searching for where she even belongs. And the Tiedemanns, power and knowledge. Claudia manipulating events, Regina paying the price, Bartos constantly being used as a pawn. Each family holds a different symptom of the same disease.
And because of that structure, every relationship becomes dangerous. Jonas falling in love with his aunt, Charlotte being both mother and daughter to Elizabeth, Tronte being the son of the unknown, who's the son of Jonas and Martha. It just keeps looping. No clean beginning, no clean end. The show basically says, you're not only emotionally shaped by your parents. In Winden, you're literally shaped by their time travel decisions. Something your grandfather does decades ago can directly cause your suffering today. The past isn't gone. It's still acting on you.
Which is why breaking the cycle becomes such a terrifying idea, because ending it means unraveling the very people inside it. To fix the origin,
These families, as they exist, have to disappear. Their love stories, their identities, their memories, all products of the error. So the final choice isn't just heroic, it's almost a kind of collective suicide, accepting that the love you feel might come from something broken and letting go anyway. That's brutal.
And it's also a brutal reflection of real life. We talk about inherited trauma, addiction, abuse, emotional patterns repeating across generations. Dark just makes that literal, physical, inescapable. The characters aren't repeating mistakes metaphorically, they're causally ensuring their family's suffering continues. And maybe no one shows the rage that comes from that prison better than Ulrich Nielsen. Because when he fights the cycle, he doesn't try to understand it. He tries to punch it.
And that's what makes Ulrich so tragic. He's not some chosen traveler or mastermind. He's just a father and a brother, thrown into this nightmare because loss hits him again. First, Mads disappears when he's young. That wound never heals. It shapes his whole life. He becomes a cop because he needs answers. Then decades later, his own son disappears. And suddenly the old pain comes roaring back. His desperation isn't just grief. It's 30 years of frustration exploding at once.
Exactly. And what makes it worse is how human his reaction is. When Ulrich realizes time travel might be real, he doesn't think philosophically. He doesn't wonder about paradoxes. He sees a target. His logic becomes simple. Go back, kill Helge as a child, stop the kidnappings, save everyone. Problem solved. Except he doesn't understand yet that he's already part of the timeline he's trying to change.
And that scene,
God, that scene in 1953 is so hard to watch. There's no heroism there, no cinematic glory, just a desperate adult man beating a terrified child with a rock. The show strips away any fantasy about fixing the past. It shows violence as what it really is, despair losing control. And the cruel twist, Ulrich doesn't stop the future. He creates it. The trauma Helge suffers there is probably what makes him vulnerable to Noah later. Ulrich becomes the cause of the monster he's trying to destroy.
And his fate might be the most painful punishment in the whole series. He doesn't die heroically. He doesn't even get closure. He just disappears. Trapped in 1953, locked in a psychiatric hospital, labeled insane, forgotten. Meanwhile, his family thinks he abandoned them. He loses everything: father, husband, detective, identity itself. All his rage, all his love, leads only to his own erasure.
And that's what makes his arc hurt so much. Ulrich isn't evil. He's just a man acting with incomplete information, trying to fight something far bigger than fists or anger can handle. You can't punch a paradox. You can't arrest fate. And sometimes the worst knots in the story aren't made by rage, but by quieter emotions: resentment, envy, desire. Because while Ulrich explodes loudly, another character causes chaos almost silently.
Yeah.
Where Ulrich is fire, noise, and fury, someone else operates in shadows, driven by something much colder. And honestly, maybe even more destructive. Because Hannah Nielsen doesn't want to fix the world. She just wants what she thinks is hers. And she's willing to let everything burn quietly to get it.
Hannah is honestly the wild card in Wyndon's bloodstream. While characters like Jonas or Claudia are carrying the weight of entire worlds, Hannah's universe is much smaller, completely personal. Everything revolves around her obsession with Ulrich and that quiet resentment she's always held toward Katerina. Her choices aren't driven by philosophy or some big mission to save or destroy time. They come from jealousy, possessiveness, that need to feel in control of at least something in her life. And that's what makes her unsettling. In a story ruled by destiny, she's terrifyingly free to be petty because no cosmic plan prepares for motives that small.
And that's why she's so dangerous. The time travelers are playing chess with reality, and Hannah just flips the board when she doesn't get what she wants. Her lie to the police in 1986, accusing Ulrich of rape, that's pure retaliation. No strategy, no temporal war, just wounded pride and revenge after rejection. And still, that single lie echoes for decades. It ruins Ulrich's life, fractures the Nielsen family even more, and feeds the atmosphere of distrust that defines Winden. She proves something uncomfortable. You don't need time travel to change history. Human pettiness already does that.
And when she finally uses the time machine, that's where it gets almost disturbing. Jonas, the stranger, everyone else carries this heavy sense of responsibility, even when they're wrong. Hannah, she treats it like a personal tool. She goes back to 1953 not to save anyone, but to insert herself into Ulrich's life when he's vulnerable and alone. It's emotional opportunism. She sees his suffering and thinks opportunity, not tragedy. And that exposes something dark. When the system itself is broken, selfishness and opportunism thrive without consequences.
And maybe the most haunting part is actually her final scene in the origin world, where the knot never existed. She's pregnant and casually suggests naming the baby Jonas to Wohler. And it gives you chills, right? Because somehow certain emotional patterns survive even when causality disappears. The same love that caused chaos in the other worlds here shows up almost innocent. And it's ambiguous. Is it hope, a subconscious memory, or proof that some cycles come from human nature itself?
In the end, Hannah reminds us the knot wasn't just cosmic accidents or grand plans. It was built from thousands of small human sins, lies, betrayals, jealousies, selfish impulses. Time travel doesn't create monsters. It just gives human flaws more room to cause damage. And while Hannah acts from impulse and emotion, someone else represents the complete opposite approach. Someone who watches time not out of passion, but to understand it.
The ultimate strategist, Claudia Tiedemann. If Hannah is chaos in human form, Claudia is pure calculation. She doesn't fight time out of love or rage, she studies it. To her, the paradox isn't a curse or a god, it's a problem to solve. Her journey goes from curious power plant director to the one person who realizes Adam and Eva have been fighting the wrong battle the entire time. She's not trying to win inside the game, she's trying to escape it.
Claudia is honestly the indispensable variable, the piece that changes everything because she chooses data over emotion. Adam is ruled by pain, Eva is ruled by attachment. Claudia works on another level: strategy, logic, patience, stretching across lifetimes. And her motivation doesn't even begin as something heroic. It starts small: her father's death, strange events at the power plant, simple curiosity. But that curiosity grows into a lifelong investigation. She doesn't just travel through time, she records it, catalogs it. She becomes the archivist of the apocalypse.
And the cost of that journey is her own humanity, or at least how others perceive it. To play the long game, she becomes distant, cold, even to her daughter, Regina. She works with both sides, helps Adam, helps Eva, not because she's indecisive, but because she knows understanding every angle of the knot is necessary. She even manipulates younger versions of herself, and emotionally, that cost is brutal. She sacrifices being a present mother, a loving daughter, to become a ghost inside the machinery of time.
And that's why she's different. Adam and Eva are conservative forces. Adam wants the silence of nothingness. Eva wants the loop preserved forever. Claudia is the true revolutionary, the only one questioning the assumption everyone else accepts, that the loop has no outside cause. While others try to win the game, she tries to figure out who built the board. Her real weapon isn't a machine or dark matter, it's observation, that white thread mapping events, believing if she traces the knot long enough, she'll find a loose end.
And her breakthrough is the most important moment of the series. She doesn't discover a bigger weapon, she finds an error. The moment one version of Jonas is taken to the alt world, something impossible in a perfect loop, That tiny inconsistency proves there's an outside, an origin. And her brilliance lies in realizing the solution isn't inside the system, but beyond it. She doesn't defeat Adam or Eva, she makes their entire war irrelevant.
And in the end, Claudia is the real hero of Dark, just not in a romantic way. She's not warm or charismatic. She's the scientist who sacrifices the present and her own emotional bonds for a future she'll never see. She gives Jonas and Martha the final answer, but never witnesses the outcome. Her victory is patience over passion, logic over dogma. She answers the question the series keeps asking: where did all of this begin? And that answer destroys Wyndon's biggest illusion.
The illusion that the knot never had a beginning. For so long, everyone believed the bootstrap paradox was natural law, that everything simply existed in an eternal circle. The beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. But Claudia's discovery reveals the truth. The loop wasn't destiny, it was an accident, a human error with a very specific origin. The endless cycle was their prison, and freedom became possible when they realized there was actually a way out.
That's the real narrative masterstroke, Lena, because for almost the entire series, Dark builds this airtight feeling of inevitability. Suffocating, honestly. The bootstrap paradox stops being just a plot tool and becomes the law of that universe, its religion. And we, as viewers, slowly fall into the same trap as the characters. We accept that this is just how reality works there. No first time, no beginning. Every event is both cause and effect at the same time. We draw the family trees, follow the loops, admire how precise everything is, all while believing we're watching a perfectly closed system. Tragic, yes, but complete. The show literally trains us to think in circles.
And that's what makes it such a brilliant deception. Every time someone tries to break the cycle and fails, it only makes the loop feel stronger. Adam believes the loop is an unbreakable prison that must be destroyed. Eva believes it must be protected at all costs. Their entire war is the loop. Even the storytelling mirrors this: repeated dialogue, mirrored scenes, prophetic dreams, everything looping back on itself. The audience starts feeling trapped too, that existential claustrophobia, like there's simply no exit. So we assume the only possible solutions are inside the system, either preserve it or destroy it.
And that's why Claudia's discovery hits so hard. She doesn't find a clever workaround inside the knot. She proves the knot is connected to something else. That mistake she finds, the two versions of the same key event, is like pulling one loose thread and suddenly the whole sweater unravels. Because it introduces probability, choice, something the deterministic model never allowed. That tiny inconsistency proves the system was never truly closed. There was an input. And if there's an input, there has to be an origin.
Which completely reframes everything we watched. All the suffering, all those devastating connections, they weren't cosmic fate. They were side effects, consequences of one localized human trauma. The characters weren't prisoners of abstract destiny. They were living consequences of one man's grief. And that's the genius twist. Not a time jump, not a hidden identity reveal, a philosophical shift. The story stops being a Greek tragedy about unavoidable fate and becomes a modern tragedy about unintended consequences.
And that's why the ending feels both emotional and intellectually satisfying, because the solution isn't fighting harder inside the rules, it's realizing someone accidentally created the game and going back to stop it from starting. Dark stops being just a clever puzzle and becomes something deeper. It says even the most complex cycles of pain usually have a root cause, and no matter how tangled the effects become, healing only happens at the source. And that source wasn't even in Wyndon.
It was somewhere else entirely, another world, another story. And the origin world is such a narrative gut punch because suddenly we leave behind all that gothic misery and see a normal, sunlit town where none of those families exist. And instead of mysterious cockmaker Tannhaus, we made him as just a grieving grandfather. His tragedy is painfully simple. His son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter die in a car accident. And like everyone trapped in the knot, he tries to use science to undo loss. Except his machine doesn't create time travel, it fractures reality itself into two broken worlds.
That perspective shift is honestly staggering. For 3 seasons, we think Winden, the cave, the power plant, is the center of everything. But the real epicenter is just a quiet road, one terrible accident. And Tannhaus isn't a villain. He's just a man destroyed by grief. And his attempt to undo that grief, something deeply human, something we all understand, accidentally tears reality apart. It's such a powerful metaphor because unresolved grief doesn't just destroy people, it destroys worlds. His personal black hole becomes a literal one, creating two entangled universes.
And suddenly, everything makes sense in a heartbreaking way. The God particle, the dark matter, the apocalyptic energy, none of it is mystical. It's fallout, shockwaves from a machine built by grief. Jonas's world and Martha's world aren't natural realities, they're scars, glitches born from love trying to rewrite physics. And life grows inside those scars, but on a broken foundation. Which means every character we followed is, in a way, a ghost created by a malfunctioning system trying to solve an impossible problem, bringing the dead back.
And that makes Adam and Eva's war almost tragic in a different way. They're fighting over the inheritance of a car crash. All those grand philosophies, wars across time, bloodline manipulations, all echoes of one grandfather's grief. The cosmic collapses into the human. The biggest rupture in reality doesn't start with an explosion, but with someone crying.
And that refines the show's whole idea of cycles. We thought the cycle was the 33-year loop, but the real cycle is grief itself. Loss leads to desperate action leads to catastrophe leads to more loss. Tannhaus loses his family, builds the machine, and the world it creates are full of people losing their own families. Jonas loses his father, Martha loses her brother, Ulrich loses his son, and each reacts with desperation, which only keeps the suffering going. It's grief looping into itself. And the only way out is to go back to the original sound and silence it.
Which is why the final mission feels so beautifully simple. Jonas and Martha aren't asked to solve physics equations or win wars. They're asked to do the one thing nobody in their worlds could truly do: stop a death, stop the car crash. And by doing that, they heal the original wound, allowing their own realities and themselves to disappear peacefully. Their sacrifice isn't for their worlds, it's for strangers. It's compassion breaking a cycle that began with inherited trauma and ending it with selfless healing. And that's what this entire conflict was really about.
Because it was never really good versus evil or preservation versus destruction. Those were just symptoms. The real conflict is between being trapped by the pain of the past and daring to create a future that isn't defined by it. Between being prisoners of a story already written and having the courage to write a new one, even if it means your own chapter has to end.
You've really hit the core of it, Lena. Because once you peel everything away, the time machines, alternate worlds, all those insane family trees, what's left is just raw trauma. That's the engine of Dark. The real conflict isn't about time or space. It's psychological, emotional. It's people fighting ghosts from their past, except in this story, those ghosts are literally walking around, talking to them, manipulating them, sometimes even killing them. And the cave? It's not just a portal. It's a wound that refuses to heal. Every trip through it feels like someone trying, subconsciously, to go back to the moment everything broke, hoping this time it'll hurt less.
And what makes it worse is how contagious that trauma becomes. It spreads through generations, not just emotionally, but literally through bloodlines and time loops. A father's suicide causes a son's despair, which later becomes the reason the father reaches that despair in the first place. pain feeding itself. And suddenly you realize the characters aren't truly fighting each other. They're fighting reflections of inherited pain, versions of themselves shaped by the same wounds. Adam fights the world that hurt him. Eva fights to preserve the world that gave her a child born from that hurt. Their war is basically a family argument blown up to cosmic scale.
Exactly. And that changes what destiny even means in the show. It's not mystical fate, it's what happens when trauma goes unhealed. When every decision you make is just a reaction to old pain, your path becomes predictable, a loop. So destiny becomes a pattern nobody knows how to break. They think they're fighting fate, but really they're fighting the gravitational pull of their own suffering, and their parents' suffering, and their grandparents' suffering. The knot isn't tied by time, it's tied by grief, shame, love twisted into obsession.
And that's why knowledge alone never saves anyone. Knowing how the loop works only makes them better at playing their parts inside it. What they actually needed wasn't more information, it was healing. And healing couldn't happen inside the loop because the loop only repeats pain. Claudia finds the way out, sure, but the act that breaks everything isn't intellectual, it's emotional. Someone has to step outside their own suffering and heal the original wound. Jonas and Martha have to stop being soldiers in a time war and become surgeons fixing the root cause.
Which makes their final journey something bigger than survival. It's transcendence. They move beyond being victims or perpetrators and become healers of a trauma that technically isn't even theirs. And the only way to do that is to give up their own existence, to absorb the pain and refuse to pass it on, even if it means they disappear. That's how you break a cycle of trauma. You consciously choose for it to end with you. And that's the leads to the most heartbreaking part.
Because they're not Adam and Eva when they make that choice. They're still Jonas and Martha, young, still capable of love without bitterness, still able to feel empathy without calculation. They're asked to give up everything, their love, their future, their very existence, not for glory or revenge, but for a quiet dinner in a world they'll never see. And that's the final paradox. Their non-existence becomes the ultimate proof that their love was real.
That final act, it's probably the purest expression of love the series could imagine, because it's the opposite of both Adam and Eva. Adam wants destruction to end suffering. Eva wants preservation so her love survives. Both are rooted in fear of loss. But Jonas and Martha choose something else. They don't destroy, they don't preserve, they give. They return their borrowed existence so the original world can live normally again. Letting go so completely, it becomes an act of creation.
And the reason they can do it is because they're still young enough to choose differently. They carry their pain, yeah, but they haven't calcified into certainty yet. They still doubt, they still feel tenderness. So when Martha asks, "Do you believe in destiny?" and Jonas says, "No," that moment feels liberating. He rejects the logic of the loop. He chooses love and choice over fatalism. And for the first time, the story steps outside inevitability.
And look at how quiet their final mission is. No war, no speeches, no armies. Just two scared teenagers holding hands, walking into light to stop a car accident. They save people they've never met for a future they'll never experience. It completely rejects the narcissism trauma creates, that your pain is the center of everything. They recognize their worlds exist because of someone else's tragedy, and instead of clinging to life, they choose to heal the cause.
Which turns their love story upside down in the best way. For the entire series, their love keeps the loop spinning. It traps them. But in the end, that same love breaks the cycle. Not possessive love, not desperate love, a mature love that says, what we have is beautiful, but it exists because others suffered. So, we'll let it go. Their last kiss isn't just goodbye, it's completion. They finally become what their love was always meant to be, the solution.
And their disappearance isn't violent, it's gentle, like fog clearing in the morning. It feels less like death and more like returning to peace, to the non-existence they were always supposed to have. They don't die as heroes, they simply never were. And by never being, they allow real life to exist. And the world they save doesn't celebrate, it just continues, quietly, normally, with only one faint, mysterious echo left behind.
An echo in the dark. That final scene in the origin world is so subtle it almost hurts. No apocalypse, no chaos. Just people gathered for dinner, laughing, living ordinary lives free from the knot. Then the lights flicker, darkness, wind outside, and Hannah feels something she can't explain. A chill. Déjà vu. And she says a name that shouldn't mean anything anymore. Jonas. And the show refuses to give us perfect closure. And honestly, that's why the ending stays with you, because some echoes don't disappear. They just become part of the silence.
You know what's brilliant about that final scene, Lena? After all the chaos, time fractures, paradoxes, entire worlds collapsing, the show ends with dinner. Just people talking, eating, living. No grand reunion, no speeches, no monument to heroes. Just normal life. Even the big dramatic moment is just a power outage, a tripped breaker. And honestly, that's the relief. Silence, normalcy. The knot disappears without fireworks because problems that are truly solved don't need ceremony. The scar's gone. Life just moves on.
Yeah, and it feels like finally exhaling after holding your breath for 3 seasons. We've been trained to look for clues everywhere. Every line, every glance feels loaded with meaning. But here, there's nothing hidden. Katerina and Hannah are just friends. Wooler's just a guy with an eye patch. Kids are just kids. No secret connections, no cursed lineage, just random, ordinary human relationships. And the relief comes from that disconnect. The universe stops being a puzzle and becomes just a place where people live, love, and sometimes the lights go out.
And that darkness, when everything cuts out, it's symbolic, but not in a scary way. It's the unknown future. And for the first time in this story, the future isn't predetermined. It's blank, open. That darkness isn't ominous, it's peaceful, a clean slate. And then Hannah shivers, says the name Jonas, and it's not the cycle returning, it's more like a ghost passing through. Not a curse, just a fading echo, like remembering a dream you can't fully recall.
And that echo matters so much because it suggests something survives. Not people, not events, but feelings, resonance. Katerina doesn't remember Jonas. She feels him, like déjà vu, like a door opening in your mind to a room that doesn't exist anymore. And that tiny moment confirms their sacrifice mattered. Their love mattered, even if the story was erased. Something emotional remained. It's not sequel bait, it's emotional closure.
Exactly. So the ending is closed and open at the same time. Plot-wise, everything's resolved. The knot's gone, the world's saved. But thematically, it opens this huge conversation about memory, legacy, love. Healing doesn't mean the past never happened. It means the past stops controlling the present. And Jonas's name there is no longer destiny. It's just a faint feeling, a whisper of something important that once existed, like the last soft note in a symphony.
A note about what remains when everything else disappears. Because that moment with Hannah raises the deepest question Dark asks. If someone is erased from time, what's left? And maybe the answer is that powerful connections leave traces, not memories, echoes, emotional ripples, a name spoken into silence at the start of something new.
That idea, emotional echoes surviving reality itself, is why the ending feels spiritual instead of just tidy. The whole show obsesses over physical consequences, bloodlines, machines, notebooks, cause and effect. But in the end, it hints at something beyond that. Jonas isn't remembered, he's felt, like emotional data surviving even after the system is wiped. It suggests love might operate on a level reality itself can't fully erase.
And weirdly, that's comforting. Their sacrifice didn't just save a family. The intention behind it, the purity of it, leaves a faint imprint. Hannah's intuition doesn't doom anything, it enriches her. Maybe she becomes kinder, maybe more empathetic. Maybe she just gets that strange feeling on rainy days, like a benevolent ghost, a quiet thank you from a universe that no longer exists.
And honestly, we, the audience, experience the same thing. Those characters disappear, but not for us. We remember them. We feel the echo. We're like Hana, living in our own world, carrying emotional weight from people who never existed in our reality, but still changed us. That's the show's final gift, letting us sit in that peaceful winding and feel the echo ourselves.
Which answers the question, what remains? Not fate, not paradoxes, meaning. For the origin world, it's subconscious intuition. For us, it's a story about grief, love, sacrifice. And Jonas's name becomes a symbol of that meaning because the hardest, most necessary act of love is letting go. And that brings us to what Dark has really been about from the very beginning.
Release. Every character is clinging to something, a person, a loss, control, revenge. And the tragedy comes from refusing to let go. Tannhaus can't let go of his family, so he breaks reality. Adam can't let go of pain, so he wants to destroy everything. Ava can't let go of her child, so she traps everyone in suffering. And the only way out is two people learning to let go of each other, their world, and themselves. In the end, Dark is about surrender.
You've nailed it, Ethan. From the first ominous moments to the final quiet breath, Dark uses insane sci complexity to tell a very human truth. Suffering often comes from refusing to accept what happened and trying to control what can't be changed. The cave isn't just time travel, it's the temptation to rewrite the past. And the show shows the catastrophic cost of giving in to that temptation and the redemption of finally choosing not to.
And it changes what strength means. Usually, heroes fight harder, longer, louder. But here, strength is letting go. Adam and Eva aren't the strongest, Claudia is. Jonas and Martha are. Because real power isn't control, it's release. And the final image isn't victory, it's absence, peaceful absence. Sometimes winning means stopping a battle that never should have been fought.
And that's why it connects with us so deeply. We all have our own knots, cycles we repeat, old wounds we revisit hoping for different outcomes. Dark holds up a mirror and shows both the fantasy of fixing the past and the terrifying beauty of letting it stay in the past. Feeling the pain, learning from it, then letting life move forward.
And that's why, despite the melancholy, the ending is hopeful. Pain still exists, loss still happens, but in the origin world, pain moves forward. It doesn't loop forever. It can be mourned, processed, eventually left behind. The hope Dark offers isn't about changing the past, but about building a future free from it.
So as we leave Winden, cursed and healed, the show leaves us with a quiet invitation. Ask yourself what you're holding on to, what loops you might be stuck in. Because maybe freedom doesn't look like triumph. Maybe it looks like letting go. Dark isn't a masterpiece just because its puzzle works. It's a masterpiece because beneath all that clockwork, there's a deeply human heart.
Sometimes the way out of the labyrinth is just to stop running and look up.
Thanks so much for going through this journey with us. We hope this conversation helped you experience Dark in a deeper way, and maybe even practice your English through something meaningful. Immerse yourself. Feel the story. Let it stay with you.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, let us know. There's always more to explore. For now, we'll leave you with that final, quiet echo. Take care.